participants in Mexico and the Caribbean and Central America, South America, and everyone who is joining us from somewhere else. Thank you for being here today. The fact that this is an international event is highlighting the success, not just of the technology nowadays, but of leadership. Leadership from Kevin and Daniel. Welcome. This session is going to be in Spanish, but we have simultaneous interpretation to English. From the United States is committed to a prosperous and inclusive North America for indigenous peoples, Black people, and other marginalized communities from all the continent. This is the first program of its type. We are going to make a test to translate this session to other indigenous languages using AI. In my origin, I remember my grandmother, who was from an indigenous community, and I remember how she worked very hard in her life to raise children who were successful, and her grandchildren are the legacy of our indigenous heritage. So we know that by testing the translation of this session by AI, we are exploring a new technology. AI did not exist 10 years ago, but I believe that through your ideas and through your work, we will be able to use these technologies to promote mutual understanding and ideas so that our peoples can succeed. And once we have these sessions translated, we will be sharing them with community spaces. We are thankful because this program also welcomes women, women who are powering development. Another ambassador said years back that it's impossible to achieve progress leaving half of the population behind. And the ideas, the initiative, and the contributions of women are necessary to power the people of the 21st century forward to a world with vision and with prosperity for all. Thank you for all your unconditional support in this process. And also Kevin, who also is 18 years old, is brilliant. Daniel Martinez, also an alumni of the program of the Young Leaders Initiative. We are proud to be sharing this session with you and support your mission from every participant here with us so that we can empower and include. And social inclusion, why is it so important? We call it diversity, equity, and inclusion, and it's simple. To have a democracy, a successful democracy, such as the Mexican democracy or democracy in the US, we have to include everyone. We have to include people with little resources, so people who need support to study in college. They need a hand and they need to be said, we believe in you. So this is social inclusion. We are also welcoming Tayde Aburto, our US speaker today. He is the pride of the US and the pride of Mexico. He lives currently in San Diego. He has worked in the state of Tabasco here in Mexico. He is a Mexican American coach for small enterprises, focusing on entrepreneurs and helping them to improve profitability and have better control over their time. We call that in English financial literacy. And to have a company, which we're not talking about large companies like Amazon or Twitter, but entrepreneurs like you are powering the economy of our nation. So you have to be a part of the formal economy. And we talk a lot about rule-based order. And why is this so important? Because what we call the protection of intellectual property or fair competition, also trademarks, respect to trademarks, and respect to driving you to present your ideas is a huge part of social freedom of each nation and the nation which is based in a free economy. So Tayde is focused on indigenous companies, and he also provides services to more than 14,000 companies. So he is committed with empowering business owners to drive growth and development in the economy. We also have here Juan Carlos Franco, who is also an alumni of the Professional Fellows Program. And he is an alumni of the Professional Program of Alumni, and he lives in Chiapas right now. He is a consultant of preparation processes for sustainability and climate action from the technical side, and in particular, productivity in the territory and production related to governance. Also, we appreciate the collaboration of Kingala to organize this mastermind session. We congratulate you. You are the future of our continent. You are the future, and you are going to inspire a new generation. We invite you to have a great session today and that you keep the connection in the chat. Please network with one another, exchange email addresses so that you can ensure that this conversation will keep going. Thank you so much for being here. And in the US, we are committed to continue this conversation.
Muchísimas gracias, Roberto.
Thank you so much, Roberto, for your presentation, for your welcome. For us, it is an honor to be here and to participate from Kingala as implementing partner of this program, which we have dedicated a lot of our energy to. So this session will be fruitful. With this welcome, I would like to give the floor to our guests today for our session, to Juan Carlos Franco and Tayde Aburto. Please welcome them, so that they have the energy for the session and with the topic that they have prepared today. Thank you. Well, it's so nice to be here, and it'll be so nice to speak with you today. This is a very interesting topic because, as they said, it's a connection between economic development with the reality and the context of our own economies. For example, grandmothers and the communities we grew up in. And it'll be interesting to hear from you from the beginning, from your origins, Tabasco and Michoacan. So with this perspective, with what you are doing now to have the electronic chamber of commerce, please tell us about your perspective about the rural environments and in Mesoamerica. How, with your business perspective, how do you see the rural indigenous context in Mexico? Of course, if you allow me, I would like to share a presentation that I have prepared today to begin the conversation. And from there, after finishing this presentation, we will have more information and we will discuss further all the all the topics that we're going to discuss. So I'm going to share. Well, good afternoon to everyone. Again, my name is Tayde Aburto. I graduated from economy of the University of Michoacán. I also have a master's in marketing from the Tec de Monterrey. Thank you so much to the US Embassy in Mexico for their invitation to participate in this series. Also, thank you to the Kingala team for your excellent work in the coordination and promotion of this session. And also, thank you, Juan Carlos, for your time and for facilitating this conversation. So today, I want to talk to you, as Juan Carlos said, about innovation and tradition. And all these businesses in rural areas and indigenous areas of Mexico. So we're going to focus on how this innovation can coexist and empower tradition in rural communities in Mexico. We are going to explore how these businesses in these areas help preserve the cultures, ancestral cultures that are present there, but they are also a way to sustainably develop the economy. Throughout this presentation, I'm going to give you a couple of examples in how integrating new technologies and new models can translate local realities without losing the essence, the cultural essence that defines the communities. To give you a little bit of context, because I know that there are some attendants that are outside of Mexico, in this country we have a lot of diversity, cultural diversity. We have 68 indigenous populations, which are the 21.5% of the national population. These communities keep languages, traditions, and knowledge that are unique and are key for biodiversity and sustainability. However, as we know, these populations face serious challenges. 70% of the indigenous populations are living in the poverty line and 28% live below the poverty line. So these are figures that I found from an official source. 44% of these communities, only 44% of these communities have access to water. So we need to understand how valuable it is to create businesses in these areas, even facing all of these challenges. So this data show a reality of inequality, both economic and social, which is framed by a limited infrastructure and access to health, education, and transportation. And from here is where we should consider any initiative. We need to acknowledge that the strengths of these communities and the barriers that they face are important to design effective and sustainable solutions. So regarding the current challenges, it is very important to understand that the specific issues that these communities face is driving immigration. So the areas are being depopulated, lack of opportunities for work opportunities and education opportunities leads people, particularly young people, to immigrate to cities looking for better life conditions. And this not only leaves rural communities without population or without its most active population, but also contributes to the loss of traditional knowledge and the social fabric. Another challenge is internal displacement. This is something that I personally lived while I lived in Michoacan. Sometimes in the communities, some people have to relocate in order to protect themselves from political, territorial, social, and violent conflicts. So these displacements leads to loss of ancestral land, which are vital for cultural identity and the subsistence of these communities. In the state of Michoacan, I had the chance to work on the Center of Municipal Development during the administration of Governor Lázaro Cárdenas, whom I admire for his commitment with Mexico's development. And during that time, I could visit a lot of municipalities in Michoacan, and I could see and face many of the challenges that these areas face in Mexico. So the situation in Mexico, in Michoacan, is very particular, just as every other state has very particular challenges. So it's important to create strategies that are particular to each community. Besides, globalization and generational change are a significant threat for conservation of the culture. Indigenous languages, traditional practices, and ancestral knowledge is at risk of disappearing if we do not take action to preserve them. This challenge is not only a cultural problem, but it's also a human rights problem and a sustainability problem on the long term. Regarding economic development locally, it is crucial that we promote the development of local communities in rural and indigenous communities, so to invest resources in business creation. Sustainable agriculture is one of the most effective strategies in this regard. We know that several rural and indigenous areas in the country, agriculture is a very common activity and they are very good at it. So when we can combine ancestral techniques in agriculture with modern techniques, we can improve productivity without compromising the health of the environment. This improves food safety and can also create additional income for the community. Another powerful tool is tourism, community tourism. The country has a lot of resources in this regard, and this project create income and promote the conservation of the environment and the conservation of traditions. We have a lot of success cases in the country that I want to share. For example, the sanctuary of the the monarch butterfly, where the communities who live in the region is committed to take care of the forest from illegal logging. So they create strategies at the local level so that many cooperatives can participate in the economy that it's created around this natural phenomenon. Finally, the circular economy is a key strategy to promote artisanal and local production. We reduce the dependency on external inputs and we create jobs in the region. So this strengthens the economy and promotes self-sufficiency, which is crucial for sustainable development on the long term. This has a positive impact on community life because economic development can have different positive effects in these indigenous communities. First of all, it creates income and it gets reinvested in the community to improve the services of education, health, and welfare. This is going to improve the quality of life and also strengthen the social fabric. Strengthening the social fabric is key for the resilience of the community, and all businesses that promote cooperation between the community help build a better prepared community to face future challenges. And finally, economic self-sufficiency is crucial because it reduces the dependency of government help and the communities can take control over their own development. This can allow them to plan long term and gives them the freedom and to promote their culture and traditions independently. So, to build a culture of prosperity with business creators, the important thing is to train the people. As we mentioned at the beginning of the session, entrepreneurial education adapted to the indigenous reality is fundamental. They need the necessary knowledge to manage their business in an effective and sustainable way. Also, mentorship and support networks are important for success. And I am going to be touching on this topic with Juan Carlos, with the work that he is doing with different business owners from indigenous and rural communities. So, establishing these networks and incubators can make a difference in the capacity of these people to face challenges and scale their businesses. When Juan Carlos shared with me the videos of manufacturers of furniture, I was very pleasantly surprised with what they are doing. So we need to develop leadership. We need to train community leaders so that they drive economic change. And this change has to be driven from within the community, respecting the existing social structures. This also promotes participation from all the community in the decision processes, which is crucial for the development, for the sustainable and inclusive development. Local businesses with a global vision is where we need to pay attention. Every business owner who is in an indigenous or rural areas is something that they have to focus on. I wanted to share this example of this company called Chocolatl in Tabasco. A key feature of economic development in these communities is the ability that they have to think locally and act globally, as this cooperative did in Tabasco. The option to look for markets outside local communities could be considered non-profitable, unprofitable, but thanks to the development of the digital economy, this option is far more viable than ever. So projects like Chocolatl is from the community of Tomaltalco, Tabasco, and now they export to the United States. So there are many co-ops like artisanal workshops or tourism projects, and they have the potential to strengthen the local economy and position these communities as international players. It's important that these businesses trade products that reflect the authenticity of their cultures and the ancestral knowledge of these communities. In regards to the creation of impact in the region, we need to discuss on how these businesses can have a significant impact in the region. We first need to talk about local employment. The first impact that we see is the creation of jobs within the community. So projects like agricultural co-ops and artisanal workshops or tourism projects offer job opportunities and help keep the population economically active in the region. And this is fundamental to avoid immigration to cities and ensure that the families can live and prosper in their own communities. Another item is the protection of cultures. These projects can have a very significant role in the preservation of cultural products like textiles, music, and food. They not only create income, but they help keep traditions and languages alive. These types of projects allow that new generations see value in their cultural heritage and promote its continuity. We should also talk about sustainable management of the land, because indigenous communities have lived in harmony with the land for centuries, and this is invaluable in a world that is always looking for sustainable solutions. So agroecology and the preservation of natural resources not only benefit the local community, but they also have an impact in the conservation of the environment at the regional level. So these three pillars of the cultural economy do not only have an impact in the economy, but they are the basis for development long term, because they promote a sense of ownership and belonging. So they will strengthen the social fabric and promote community, which is essential to face future challenges. As you know, part of this conversation about how we can innovate to bring more visibility to these businesses. In the last 15 years, there have been a lot of online marketplaces so that they can contribute to the digital economy. As you can see, we have a lot of online marketplaces focused on finance, real estate, etc. So at this time, we cannot ignore one of the pillars of profitability, and that is innovation in commercialization. Technology and digital platforms are tools that will help connect businesses with markets in cities and in rural areas. So we need to create platforms that allow the people from these communities to sell their markets to a wider audience. There are no reasons to have these people to not keep the profits of their labor. So they need to have tools that allows them to keep their profits. So we will need to avoid middlemen who will keep most of the profits from them. And I will share a model from a digital platform that connects the rural producers to the direct market, reducing the need for intermediaries so they can sell directly their products through digital promoters who make earnings on commission per sale. So this expands opportunities, market opportunities for rural entrepreneurs, and strengthens the value because it ensures that a large portion of the profits can be kept by the people who work and live in the community. And if we want to discuss a strategy that has a high economic impact, definitely this is one of them. In this slide, we have a little concept that we called Guardianes del Porvenir, or Guardians of the Future. This platform connects rural producers with the market. And so it is a very simple process where the Guardian shares the catalog in their website so that they can help entrepreneurs so that their products and services have a wider audience that the artisan can achieve by themselves. The recommendations for public, social, and private institutions for businesses in rural and indigenous areas so that they may prosper. It's very important that these institutions actively involve these communities in their support. Here are some recommendations. First is tax incentives, which are a very powerful tools to attract investment, create programs of tax incentives for businesses that operate in indigenous and rural areas. Second, development in infrastructure, because without roads, digital connectivity, and access to markets, producers will face challenges. So institutions must prioritize infrastructure improvement. so that commercialization and development of economic activities is easier for these communities. Also, training programs are crucial. As I said earlier, these programs in business and technical skills adapted to rural context need to be promoted and implemented so that people can have the tools to compete in the global market. And finally, opportunities to explore to trigger economic prosperity in the regions. We can identify and leverage opportunities that are essential to transform the growth of the region. We can focus first on the green economy. So, rural communities are in a unique position to lead projects related to renewable energies, sustainable agriculture, and tourism. This can not only create income, but they help take care of the environment, which is valuable for these communities. This type of economy is not only a trend, but it's a need for sustainable development, and it will benefit the people and the planet. Another important opportunity is in traditional crafts. So, cultural products can create economic prosperity because these products have a lot of added value in the global market. Consumers look for authenticity and cultural connection in the products that they acquire, and indigenous communities have a unique offer. Technology and innovation are powerful tools to develop efficiency and the scope of businesses in these areas. The use of mobile and digital technologies allow rural business owners to access new markets and optimize the production and distribution processes. This does not only improves their income, but also includes these businesses in the global economy. For these opportunities to materialize, it's important that the public, private, and social institutions support as needed. So this includes investment in infrastructure, training programs adapted to the local context, and the creation of strategic alliances that allows communities to connect with national and international markets. I will end my presentation here so that we can have a more detailed discussion with Juan Carlos. If you have any question or if you need more information, please contact me. Here is my contact information. I am available to discuss how we can work together to drive development in rural and indigenous areas in Mexico. And I hope that this presentation had offered something of value for all of you. Thank you so much. So, Juan Carlos, the floor is yours to delve into the topics that I just presented. Thank you. I think this is a very good introduction for this conversation. I would like to add and offer a little bit more context that allows any region to feel identified and represented. Everywhere we have territories where we have an attachment to the land. Right now, this attachment is being moved because with the newer generation, we have a lot of interest in innovation. But at the same time, we have we have a global perspective. But as you say, also this heritage, not only cultural heritage, but also economic heritage of what it implies to be from the Mesoamerica region. I would like to offer a bit more of context to complement this idea that you presented. It is that the region of Mesoamerica and other regions of Mexico and the continent at this time they are identified as the regions with the most cultural richness. So this has to do with the way that we have used the land and the resources. So, for example, in my region, in Chiapas, the Maya region, the diversity that we have. So, this context that is repeated in Honduras and Nicaragua and also in Oaxaca and other regions of the country gives us certain elements of identity. So, all of these people that's developing business programs and business models like you do in San Diego, and all of this amount of business creators. Imagine that we still have the same conditions, like the development of models of businesses in this region. We know that the contexts are different, but I think that it is very positive because it is a framework of reference for local development. And by local, I mean local in Mesoamerica. So what I mean to say is that this area is very rich, but also very vulnerable, not only socially and environmentally, but also in terms of climate change. Most the factor that is driving people away is this factor that we have been studying. And it is a very important moment to implement development and innovation and the culture of profitability in the region. So we want the people to be here and to be economically developed here at the same time that they preserve local festivities or even improving them and create a local economy. And before that, before asking you some questions, I'd like to tell you something. Some years ago, we started to organize in the region here in Chiapas, a region called Selva Soque, which from a study that we made, it was the region that most impact it was going to have in terms of climate change and deforestation. So we said, let's start with some tests, prototypes in the most complicated areas. This region received in the 70s and the 80s a lot of immigration, which was displaced from the higher regions of Chiapas, who moved to this soccer region. And this rural population, it wasn't necessarily indigenous, but then lived the reality of internal displacement. It was a process of cultural integration, complex cultural integration, and detonated a lot of conflicts and problems. So in 2013, there was a hurricane in the area, and the result was impactful, but it triggered something very necessary, which was productive governance. There were two examples of companies, businesses, private business owner and a social property business. It's a co-op from the land called Ejido. So these examples were dedicated to forestry management, but they had a productive model, a profitable model. But the reality is very complex. Even then, it can be very profitable. So this led us to have only two projects, as I mentioned, a private one and a socially owned one. And now in 2024, at this time, a lot of time later, after a long decision-making process in the communities and organizations like ours and public support, now with international cooperation, we are developing 4 business models with a focus on the land. And what I mean is more than 250,000 hectares. There are 4 value chains: production of wood, of resin, tourism, production of inputs. So we have projects of building business businesses, but they are focused on profitability and the community. This is a model that is only catching attention from the international agenda and can be replicated in other ways. But right now, we are developing a type of factory which is owned by 10 indigenous communities. And the way in which the culture is being, the business culture is being accelerated is very fast. So the decisions that are being taken in very few months. So where is the fabric located? Where are we going to put our production processes? So what I mean to say is that there is not going to be enough money from international cooperation or public funds that allows us to adapt to future contexts. So the decision that we made with the communities and these companies and ourselves is to be focused on the land. And this focus has to create companies that are connected in value chains. So this is why you saw the example of the furniture makers. And you need to look at it from all the environments. So what are the variables? We need to have a land, we need to have ecosystems and communities that have been there. So we have economic potential in management of resources, and that opens the door to other services. So technical assistance, marketing. So this is what I wanted to say. This is becoming a project, a test project. And in Chiapas, now it's looking at it like a pilot to drive public policy. So what do we do so that we have this installed capacity? And I want to close with a question, with the experience that you share with us. How can we tell business owner and businesses, even from people that has a single project and has developed this project, or someone who is thinking about a project on a community level managed by the community, what would you recommend so that this person says, okay, I am going to start developing a project that drives economic development and also connects with my culture and the culture of my region? So what would you recommend? Who can they talk to? What steps should they take? And even the topics that are not taught in school or at home, how do you build the culture, which is very hard individually and culturally? The concept of profitability that covers every cost, like being on a land. But I don't know if that was too wide, but I wanted to give some context to understand the potentials that we have in Mesoamerica. Yeah, I was taking notes, Juan Carlos, of what you were sharing about your experience, because success of these projects will depend on people like you who have the experience and education and the skills and the tools to help these business creators in these areas. So quickly, I will mention something, is that there are no small businesses. There are not two small businesses. Any idea that you have for a product or a service, do not disregard it just because of the size that it can become. There are companies that do not grow at the level of Facebook or Amazon, that can receive incomes of millions of dollars, but they have, those projects can have a large economic impact that could be even comparable to the money that Amazon earns. So, as you mentioned a few minutes ago, we have some projects that take a lot of years, but they have economic impact, which is long term, medium and long term. So, in indigenous communities, there are different cultural situations, different traditions that you need to take into account. But if you are going to create a business by yourself and sell your products and services, just take into account what I mentioned, that you can sell your products and have a very developed infrastructure, and you can do that online. And if you are part of a co-op, you can have access more resources, but likewise there need to be agreements within that co-op so that this business can work. And that is the case in which you have worked on of how four models were developed within that community and the operation in the land. So that is being reinvested. The profits are being reinvested into the community. So I love what you said about the government and NGOs. They really do not have enough resources to support the needs of all of these rural and indigenous communities in the countries. So growth and development has to start from the community itself. And this growth, this economic growth, can be achieved through entrepreneurship. And this is why this session today is so important, so that people who live in these communities and who think that they are not able to achieve this, they need to start thinking that they can achieve this, because it doesn't matter that you do not have enough resources. Your business may not be scalable, but it will have impact. So if you have basic knowledge of how to start a business, which you asked, first of all, you need to know if there is demand for the product or service that you want to sell. So, for example, we're going to talk about handicrafts. You need to see where in the world your craft can be sold. For example, some communities export their crafts to Japan and Eastern Europe. So you need to have that global vision of what you're going to be producing locally. And after you detected that there is a demand, then you need to see what resources you do need to start your operation, at least to a point where it is profitable. As you mentioned, this is a topic that it's not dealt with frequently, but it's important to discuss, because we cannot live just with the joy of creating our products, because if no one buys them, then they are going to uh, they're not going to be profitable. So that happens to some businesses, like the cacao company that I presented. Sometimes they lost the products that they created because it nobody bought it. So it's important to take this into account. So once the product is in the market and it's being promoted, how is the idea going to create profit so that you can reinvest it in your business or in the community? I think that it is very important. And I don't know if you can tell us about what you do there in the US. I think it would be very interesting to hear, like perhaps I'll say it not with the intent of saying it like we can do that here as well, but what do you do in the US? But what kind of people do you interact with in the reality that you live in? I think it'll be interesting to hear. So I arrived to San Diego in 2006, and in 2008 I had to I started to I started with the Hispanic Chamber of Electronic Commerce, and I was doing a study as a thesis of e-commerce in exporting companies in Mexico. So this is how I started to study this topic. And while I was developing my thesis, I realized that in the United States, there was a digital bridge between the Hispanic market and the general market. So when you measured, you could select, even today, two companies, similar sized companies that are operating in the same industry and in the same market. For example, one company of pool cleaning in San Diego and one company of pool cleaning in Texas. Even if both have 10 employees in the company, the levels of income are going to be different based on, first of all, the markets and also how they operate their businesses. So when you take that into account, companies that have a digital presence like a website or are active in social media or are creating a database to share the story of their product and their services and to be the face behind the brand, the companies that are taking these steps and participating in the digital economy are likelier to have more customers and a little bit more profit margin because they are using tools that help them be more professional and optimize their operations. So my work from 2008 has been be an ambassador of the digital economy in the Hispanic community. And this is a very relevant topic because through the years we have cooperated with companies that they are not only Latino owned. And this is a topic that I really love because of the impact that these tools have in the dreams of these business owners. I really do not know any business creator that starts a business thinking that they are going to fail and not generate profit. Everyone wants to turn their passion and the love for what they do into a profitable business so that they can have a level of income and a life around that company, around that business. So my role is see how to connect business creators and networking to bring resources to organization in the digital area so that they can use them within their own companies and help connect them with businesses or clients in other markets. With the same intent, even businesses in San Diego need to think beyond San Diego and beyond the US. And it's the same that we discuss in the rural and indigenous areas of Mexico. And the same principle applies in Mexico and in the US in its rural areas. Also here we have a digital gap between rural and urban areas. We have a high level of companies that are very small in the US that still do not have a digital presence, that they would like to have one and they're learning how to do it. But of course, the pandemic changed the way in which these companies looked at the digital economy. Many of them were able to save their businesses thanks to e-commerce. So this is a very important moment for someone like me who has been talking about the importance of the internet for small businesses. So this is the perfect moment to be able to help more businesses to have an active participation in the digital economy. And this does not have a frontier. So there is nothing more exciting than to see US entrepreneurs making deals with entrepreneurs in Mexico and other areas in Latin America, in areas that you never thought would be possible. And speaking to the fact that there are never enough resources for economic development, the internet helps so that business creators create their own business opportunities and the development and growth opportunities in the region where they live. So based on that experience that you mentioned about comparing companies in the same market level, this is how it's interpreted in Southeast Mexico. We see two scales, one in which there is a lot of interest in the development of the Southeast, public initiatives, private initiatives, and at the same time, the areas, indigenous and rural, they look at them like very separate worlds. So we see their opportunities and risks, mainly opportunities. So I would like to ask, what would you like to say to that maybe hidden talent, the kind of people that you interact with today, but that maybe they are just children, teenagers, students who live in an indigenous community, whose parents speak indigenous languages? Because interacting with at least more than one language, that already changes your way of thinking. And in this digital world and this move towards artificial intelligence, I think it's proven that people who grow up in diverse environments and from an early age can grow close to technologies. What would you recommend to those emerging talents? I have lived with a lot of children who are connected to the nature and who live in these indigenous communities, but who are very smart. What would you say to them? And what would you say to public, private institutions about how to connect these two worlds, the world that is growing rapidly and technology with this talent, for example, in Southeast Mexico, where we have a lot of youth? Chiapas, at least, is the state that has the most young population in the country, and they live in very difficult environments. So many do not achieve full education. But how can we connect the interest towards the region to develop for economic development with the talent that is present, but it's not connected yet? So how do we connect this chain links? Because there is a lot of demand of labor and we have the talent, but we still need that missing link. So what can we do? The way I see it, at the level of rural communities and indigenous communities, and I know that you talk about the talent that they have because you have seen it. You are looking at these young people who have a lot of skills to do a lot of things. So first, I would like to say to the young people who are able to see this presentation, do not be limited in your potential. And what I mean by that is we, in many occasions, with what's inside our head, we limit ourselves. Maybe I don't speak Spanish very well, or I don't speak English very well, as an example. So the young people who live in this community, they need to create relationships with business owners in your community, and they need to grow close to see how you can add value to what they are already doing. It's important that they find mentors within their community that have already started a business, that have some success. So if they're thinking of doing the same, you need to grow close because you learn a lot from the mistakes and the successes of others. I am very surprised about how here in San Diego we have a very large community of immigrants from Oaxaca, and some of them grew up with their indigenous language. So they do not speak Spanish very well and they're not interested in speaking English. And what I am very surprised about them is that many of them have businesses in the US and are operating businesses in the US. I have to hired services from one of them. They came to my house and we had some communication issues because he didn't speak any Spanish. So his cousin was translating from Spanish to their own language. But what I want to get to is how this very talented person crosses the border, creates a business, builds wealth for his family based on his hard work. And I know that you live something like this in in the communities that you work on. There are very talented people, and they are only missing a way to channel that energy so that they can see progress in what they do. Because when you see progress in the activities that you do daily, that motivates you to continue doing it. So instead of being guided only by money and profitability or by trends in social media, that is not the way to start a business. Businesses have to be started with passion that you have for the product or the service. You need to invest the skills that you have in the project, and you need to acquire, or you need to complement the skills that you do not have with other people who do have them. So this is how you create impact that the community leaders are looking for, because they know that if they promote economic growth internally from the community, they can have better outcomes in the region where they live. So we're going to be closing with some questions, and I believe this is very interesting. But from other perspectives, basic elements for profitable are, for example, the market, as you said, who is going to buy? And everything that is part of the business model. So second, the market. And not to say the market is ready, but what are the steps that we need to follow so we can build markets, more than one, markets that can understand, as you said, there is a very large community, even in the cities. In Mexico, we have a lot of population from indigenous and rural origin who has immigrated, and they are also potential markets. And we also know that a lot of the economy nowadays, and from America, the continent in general, one of the main drivers is the economy that is being developed by small business owners who have Mexican origin, Latin American origin, and we know that they are growing. So there is some cultural attachment. So how do you see the potential, the real growth? How can it be connected with the roots that we have in Mexico, Mesoamerica, and our countries? Like, for example, I would like to taste the mole from my region, or I would like the furniture of my house from a very specific species of wood that comes from this specific area, which is related to my heritage. So maybe this is a potential market that maybe does not exist yet, that goes beyond the stereotypical cultural products. So how do we create a culture of commerce and a market culture that speaks to the person who is offering and connect with the person who is buying? And on the other hand, investment. The example that I was giving about the many hectares of forest, that's not something that not everybody is going to do because it's a lot of risk involved. So we have very little time to reduce emissions, carbon emissions, to address climate change. But we have accelerated investment in the agendas that have social impacts, social governance, and environmental impacts. And this is something that is growing, but in the local reality, we cannot see it. So there is a lot of consequences that we see in the community from the environment. So this is something that can become key indicators, and the financial world is trying to move towards not only profitability but also social impact. So I think this is a potential source of investment, and it needs to have a return, it needs to have an impact. So I think that those two pillars can help a lot. On the one hand, the market, and on the other hand, investments. And we need to have actors in the middle, like institutions, private and public, internationals. So here are not going to, our audience is not going to be just entrepreneurs in these areas, but also people from those institutions. So from your perspective, how do you see the future? Where do you think this topic about innovation and development is going from the perspective of the people in indigenous and rural communities in Mexico, beyond this vision about just continue to be the way we are? But we need to evolve. We need to keep our roots, but we need to create an economy. We need to speak to those who will take us far. So how can you address the the business creator who does not even speak Spanish? So how is he going to take products from his region in Oaxaca to the world?
Sí. Oye, nada más dijiste mole y me distrajiste
You
de
mentioned
uno
the
de mis
mole, and
platillos favoritos.
you got me distracted because that is one of my favorite dishes from
Mira,
Mexico.
responder algunas
So
de
to
las preguntas que
answer
me acabas de hacer,
the
primero déjame
questions that
mencionar en
you
cuanto a esa
posed, I would like to mention
creación de demanda
first
para productos que a veces el
that to
consumidor no
create
conoce.
demand that
Hay
the
ciertas
consumer
palabras clave
does
que te voy
not
a dar un ejemplo.
know,
Digamos
products
que yo
that the
estoy en
consumer
San
does not
Diego
know,
y busco
I can give you some examples. If I am in San Diego
mole
and I look for
de
mole
Oaxaca, por darte un
from
ejemplo.
Oaxaca, to give you an
Google
example,
va a darte varios
Google is going
resultados.
to give me a lot of results
Si
with
un
that
emprendedor
search.
en
And
Tabasco está haciendo,
if
o en Chiapas, no sé, Guerrero,
a
está haciendo
business owner
ese
in
tipo de mole verde,
Tabasco
negro,
or
dulce,
Guerrero,
etcétera,
it's creating a type
el
of
hecho de que
mole,
ellos tengan su
the
sitio web
fact that they
y
have their
esté el
website
sitio optimizado con las palabras
and the
clave
website
para
is optimized
llegar
with the
a un
keywords
cierto tipo de
so that
audiencia
it can
que no
arrive to a
precisamente
certain
busca
type of
el
audience
producto
that
que
maybe
tú
is not
vendes,
looking
puede ser alguno
for the product
alternativo,
that you
puede ser
sell, but
una
an
versión
alternative
diferente a lo que ellos
product
están buscando,
or a different
les va a dar
version of
esos
your product,
resultados, le van a dar
it is
el
going
website.
to
Si el website se ve
they are going to
profesional,
arrive to your
si el
website. And if the
consumidor
website is
van a
professional
seguir
and it creates
leyendo la
trust in the
información en ese
consumer, they're
sitio
going to
web.
continue
Y ahí es
browsing
donde
the website.
tiene el emprendedor la oportunidad
And there is
de
where the
compartir su
business
historia, de
creator
compartir
has the
una
opportunity
narrativa
to
que ayude
share their
a esa
story
persona que llegó por
and
error
share their
a tu
narrative
sitio
to
web
that person who
de
arrived
conocer
to your
la historia
website
de
by
tu
mistake,
producto, el
to know
conocer
the
el
story of your
impacto
product,
que está
to know the
teniendo tu
impact
empresa
that
en
your
la
company
comunidad
has
para
within the
otros
community.
consumidores en Estados Unidos y
There
alrededor
are a
del
lot of
mundo que
consumers
están
in the US and the
seleccionando
world
productos o
who
servicios
are
no
selecting
solo
products
en
or
base a la
services
calidad o el precio
not
que
only
ofrece
based on
pues
the
el
quality
producto o
and
ese servicio,
price
sino también van más allá y
for the
quieren saber
product or the service, but they
si
also
voy a
want to
probar
know
este producto diferente, al menos sé que si voy a pagar $10 por este mole,
if I'm going to pay
esa
$10
inversión en
for this
educación
product.
para
$2 are being
los
invested
niños
in
nacionales
education for
en la comunidad
children in
de
elementary school
Tabasco
in
o de
such and
Chiapas.
such
Entonces
community
ya viene esa
of
parte
Tabasco and
de,
Chiapas.
de la
So there
atracción social
is
que
this
tienen
part of
estos
social traction
productos y
that these kinds
las
of
comunidades
products
rurales
have,
indígenas tienen una
and
ventaja
that indigenous
competitiva
rural
porque
communities
no hay
have a
hipocresía en las
competitive
historias que ellos
advantage because
cuenten
they will not
como
be
están
lying. There will
desarrollando
not be
su
any
emprendimiento y en
hypocrisy
el
in how
impacto
they
que
are
ha tenido
developing
ese
their
emprendimiento.
business
A
and
mí
in
me
the
toca
impact
ver
that this
empresas en
business is
Estados
having.
Unidos que, por ejemplo,
I
compran,
see
voy
companies
a pensar en café,
in the US that,
van y
for
compran
example,
café
buy
a México
coffee from Mexico,
dicen, estamos donando
and then they say we donate $1
a
for
esa
every cup of
comunidad,
coffee to that
pero
community.
realmente
But
no sabemos si lo están
they
haciendo
do not
con
really,
la
I mean,
con
we
la
don't
buena
know if
voluntad
they are
de esa
actually doing
comunidad,
it,
porque ha habido
if
casos
they're doing
donde
it with the right people,
llegan y
because
no
sometimes they
invierten en la comunidad. Entonces,
provide that donation, but it's
esta,
not being
esta
invested in the
alianza
community. So
con,
when you
con el
share the story
emprendimiento
from the
local,
community
con esa
with
visión
local
global que damos
businesses,
en la
with global
presentación,
vision
todavía
that we
agregas
spoke
un
about
mayor
before,
porcentaje de
you
credibilidad
add a
a lo que
larger
tú estás
percentage
diciendo en
of
tu sitio web
credibility
de
to what you
X
say
cantidad
in
de
your
dólares se
website
van a
about
invertir
this amount of dollars
a
will
llevar
be
agua potable a
invested
la comunidad, que es un
to
problema
get
que
water to
tenemos
the
en
community,
México,
which
que
is a
vamos a
problem
construir
that many of them
tres,
have.
cuatro salones
So we're
nuevos
going to
en
build
una escuela,
new
etcétera, ¿no? Entonces,
classrooms in a
eso te abre
school.
oportunidad
That kind of
y
thing
cualquier
gives
producto o servicio
offers
que
an
vendes,
opportunity
más allá de la
for
salud
you,
y más
for
allá de lo
any
formalizado
product or
que,
service that you
como tú
sell that
mencionaste,
is
para que puedan
beyond
cerrar esas transacciones comerciales, aunque tú
handicrafts
estés
and
vendiendo a través de
stereotypical products that
plataformas
you sell.
digitales, te va a permitir que puedas
So the
venderlo a
fact
precios
that you are
menores y
selling
entonces vas a tener una
through
mayor margen
digital
de utilidad
platforms
por esos
allows you to
productos
sell
que tanto trabajo a ti te
at a
están
larger
costando
price,
y que te van a
and
permitir
you
generar
can get
ingresos
more
y crecer
profit from the products
de
that you
tu
create,
emprendimiento.
and that
El
will allow
problema del
you
acceso a
that will
recursos
allow you to grow
del
and
gobierno
have
o
more
de
access to resources.
organizaciones sin fines de lucro,
And
etcétera, ya
about
mencionamos
resources from the government and from
supermercados.
NGOs, we
Sabemos que hay
already
bastante interés
stated that
en
they are
apoyar estos
limited. They
emprendimientos.
are very
Desde la
interested in
parte del gobierno,
supporting
pues
these
lo único que les
businesses,
podemos pedir
but
es de que
from the
ayuden a
government,
facilitar
the
el
only thing that we can
emprendimiento
ask
en
is
estas
to
zonas
help
indígenas y rurales, es decir,
facilitate entrepreneurship in these
municipalizaciones, tal
areas.
vez
I
algunos
mentioned that
incentivos
in
que les
my presentation.
tal vez en los primeros 2 o 3
Tax
años no se les
incentives, maybe
cobra
in the first
impuesto
2, 3 years,
y que se
they are
comprometen que lo
not
que ellos
charged
pagaron por esta
taxes,
utilidad lo
or
reinvierten
they
en la empresa o
can
en la comunidad.
commit
Puede
so
haber
that whatever they were going to pay in
diferentes
tax
situaciones de
can
acuerdo
be reinvested in the
a
community. There are
las
many scenarios
características de
that
cada
are
comunidad,
possible
porque
based on the
no es lo
characteristics
mismo
of each
pensar que
community,
una
because
comunidad
it's not going to be the same
pequeña en el estado de Guerrero
thinking
que
about a
una
small
en
community
Aguascalientes,
in
porque luego
Guerrero
va a haber
or
algunas
in
diferenciaciones
Michoacan. There
donde
are going to be
la
differences.
inteligencia y la sensibilidad de los servidores
And this is
públicos va a
where
depender
intelligence and
para seguir estas
sensitivity
políticas
on the
públicas que
part
ayuden
of
al fortalecimiento y crecimiento de estas
these
comunidades. Y
institutions is going to help the
las
growth of these
ONGs que
communities.
tienen la
And
capacidad
NGOs who
de
have the
dar
capacity
recursos para apoyar
to gather
emprendimientos,
resources to
eh,
support
va a ser interesante
businesses is
que
going to
puedan
be
apoyar estos
interesting if
emprendimientos que
they
ya están
can
teniendo algo de
support
difusión, ¿no? Para
the
que también
businesses that are
tengan la
having already some
oportunidad
traction
de
so
saber que
that
todos estos sacrificios que tú
entrepreneurs who
mencionaste
already made all of these
pasan todos
sacrifices,
estos años
all
de
of those
reuniones,
years of
años de recabar
meetings,
fondos y ir
of
poco a poquito
resource gathering,
haciendo
of
crecer el proyecto
doing
hasta que puedan
everything
tener una empresa,
incrementally
por
to
ejemplo,
grow the project
escalable y
up
que
to a
ya
point
estés en el mercado.
where,
Ahora,
for
esta
example, the
invasión de
furniture
fondos
company
también
already has
puede dar
furniture
estos muebles al
in the
mercado en
market.
general para
So
que puedan
how
darle
the
acompañamiento
story of those of
a
this
una silla
furniture
de
is
alquiler
communicated.
que va a
So
tomar 4 horas,
instead of buying
mejor
an
decirlo,
IKEA
con una
chair
silla
that's
de
going
una
to take me
comunidad
4 hours to build,
indígena que está haciendo
instead I can buy a chair
labor
from this indigenous
de
community that
reciclaje, que
is
está cuidando
cutting
los recursos
wood
naturales de esa
responsibly, that is
comunidad.
taking care of
Ellos
natural
económicamente,
resources of this
aparte de ser
community. I
una
support
utilidad de ese
that
producto,
business, and I
está
know that the
yendo a
profits from the
otras
product that I
áreas de
buy
alto impacto
is going
dentro
to
de la
have a
comunidad.
high
Al final del
impact
día,
in the
todos los
community. So
eh,
at the end of the day,
colaboradores, todos los
all
actores
of the
que
players, all
existen
of the
dentro del mercado juegan un
actors
papel
in the
muy
market are
importante
going
desde
to
las
play
instituciones
a very
públicas
important
y
role, from
privadas,
public
como
institutions, private
la misma
institutions,
organización dentro de la
to
comunidad y el mismo mercado, ¿no?
the community organization and the
La
market
relación del mercado, del consumidor con las
in
empresas,
relations
la
with
empresa es la que tiene que
the
convencer
relationship
de
of the
una manera que
consumer
atraiga,
and the
que
company. They
cautive,
have
que
to tell
motive
their
a
story in
nuevos
a very
compradores
compelling way
dentro
so
de
that it
México
can
y fuera de
motivate
México,
more buyers
a
in
que tengan la
Mexico and
confianza
outside of
de
Mexico, so
pedir
that
ese
they have the
producto,
trust to
recibirlo y
request
hacer
that product,
un
receive that
tipo de
product,
campaña que motive a
and
ese
then create a
comprador
campaign
a
to
regresar
motivate
al
that
Google y dejar
that buyer
un
to
comentario,
leave a good review,
apoyarlo a través de
to support them
un
via
retweet del contenido o
some
compartirlo en
retweet in
Facebook,
social
etcétera.
media
Una vez
or
que
share in
identifiques estos
Facebook. So
embajadores
once you
de
find
estos
those
productos y
ambassadors
servicios,
of your product
es
and
cuando tú te das
service,
cuenta que
is when you realize
eh,
that
trabajo, la energía que tú
your
estás
work and
invirtiendo
the
en
energy that you have
conocimiento y en datos
invested
está
in
bien.
sharing your story
Pero
with the
son
world
algunos de los
is
detalles que es
working.
importante
So
tomar
those
en
are
cuenta
some of
porque
the
no te puedes
details that
sentar
you
con tu
need
producto
to take into
maravilloso,
account. You can't just have your
sustentable,
wonderful,
que está
sustainable
teniendo
product
impacto económico en
that
la
is
región y
having
ya sentarte y
economic
esperar
impact in the
que
region.
los
You cannot just
compradores
sit with
y el
it
apoyo
and
llegue solo.
expect
Es hacer lo que
that the
tú
buyers
has
and the
hecho
support
exitosamente
is
con
going
las
to arrive on
personas
its
con
own.
las cuales tú
You
estás
need to do
colaborando.
that also.
No, buenísimo,
You need to
buenísimo. Creo
create
que ha
that.
sido una plática bastante
Okay, this has
enriquecedora.
been
Gracias
very
por
good. I think this has been a very enriching
no sé si
session.
un comentario
Thank you for
de
your
mi lado. Creo que
experience.
gente que
Do you have any
creo que esta
final
va a ser
comments?
una de
From my
varias
part,
pláticas
I
que
think this is going to be
tendrán
just one
algunos
of
comentarios ahí
the talks that we're
que
going to have. I see some
darle
comments that
seguimiento.
may be
No sé si
interesting
quisieras
to
comentar
address.
algo
I don't know
de
if
cierre en esta parte.
there is something you need to say to
No,
close the session.
nuevamente darte las gracias a Juan Carlos por tu tiempo, por
I would like
compartir
to
tus
thank you
experiencias con nosotros.
for
Y
sharing
pues más
your
bien dejarle un
experiences with
último
us.
comentario a los que
I
van a ver
only want to
esta
leave a
presentación,
comment
es
for everyone
simplemente
who is going
compartir
to
desde mi
see
propia
this session
experiencia.
later. And
El
this is
cielo
something
es
that I
el
want to
límite,
share from
realmente
my own
sí lo
experience is
escuché
that
de que
the sky is the limit.
todo el mundo
And
lo
this is
dice,
not a
pero
cliche
en realidad sí
expression.
llega hasta donde uno
You
quiere.
just
Eh,
arrive
Uno
wherever
se puede
you
poner
want
los
to arrive.
limitantes o se puede
You place
agarrar
the
las
limits
herramientas
on
necesarias
yourself.
para
So you can
superar
limit yourself and you can
esas
just
limitantes, ya
leverage
sea en
all the
cuestión de
tools to
educación, de
break the limits
recursos,
that you have
de
in
experiencia,
terms of
etcétera, porque es un
education, of
fenómeno que
resources, and
el
experience. The
mercado
market is really
responde
very forgiving,
a
and
cosas
the market
buenas
responds
cuando son
to
expuestas
goods, to the good things
ya sea en México, en Estados Unidos,
when
donde
they are
sea. Entonces,
advertised, either
tener
in
esa
Mexico or the US
mentalidad
or whenever.
de
So
abundancia
to have
en tu vida para que te
that
ayude siempre a buscar los recursos que
that
te ayuden a
growth
prosperar
mentality that
y
helps
no
you
las
get the
limitantes que te
resources that
van
you
a
need
hacer ser
instead of
una víctima. Entonces, siempre piensa en eso,
victimizing
cómo
yourself
buscar los
and
recursos
creating
para
limits
salir
for yourself.
adelante
So
y no
think about
sentarte
finding
a
the
victimizarte y
resources
decir
to
que no
move
hay
forward instead of
apoyos,
sitting
que no hay
and
recursos, que porque eres de una
moping
comunidad indígena,
about
que porque eres de
the
una
lack of
comunidad que tiene
resources
buena
because
casa,
you are
porque
from an
eres
indigenous
latino,
community or a
porque
rural community
el
or because
café, etcétera.
you
No,
are
tú
Latino
mismo
or because your
creas las
skin is dark.
oportunidades para
You have
salir
to
adelante.
create
Así que ten
the
eso en mente para
opportunities to
todos
move
aquellos
forward. So
emprendedores
keep
que
that
nos
in
están
mind.
viendo y acérquense
For all
a
entrepreneurs that are
organizaciones
looking
públicas, privadas,
this
sin ánimo
session,
de lucro,
just
que
grow
tienen
closer
las
to the
herramientas, los
organizations that
recursos,
have
las
the
herramientas
programs, the
para
resources, the
ayudarlos a
tools
ustedes a
to
salir
help
adelante. El
you
emprendimiento no
move
tiene que ser
forward.
un camino que
Entrepreneurship
tú
is
construyes solo.
not a
Hay
path that you
demasiados
build on your
recursos allá
own.
afuera
There
que
are a lot
ustedes
of
pueden
resources out there
aprovechar
that
y
you can leverage,
en esa
and you need to
eh,
become
o tener esa chispita que les
or
ayude
to
siempre
have
a
the
estar
spark
pensando dónde pueden
that
encontrar
leads you to think
lo que
where you
necesitan
can
para
find
poder
what you
lograrlo.
need to
Muchas
be able
gracias.
to achieve success. Thank you so much.
Muchísimas gracias a Tayde y a Juan Carlos, de verdad que es
Thank
una
you, Tayde, and thank you, Juan Carlos.
y
This
también
has been a
tomé
very
notas
enlightening
entre ellas, algunas
session. I took some notes as
necesitamos
well as some
revisar
questions
para que puedan hacer
that
como
we
las
need to go over
conclusiones respecto a estas.
to
Hay algunas
conclude,
preguntas
to
concretas
have some conclusions. We have
muy de
4
manera,
specific
de manera
questions
general para que
that
la
I'm going to
conversación
read.
siga ahí en tono en este rumbo. Edgar Sánchez escribe,
Edgar
presentas un
Sanchez
modelo muy
writes,
interesante y
you
novedoso
present a
para el
very
desarrollo de las
modern
comunidades
and
indígenas.
interesting
Sin
model for
embargo,
the development of
dejamos pasar
indigenous
retos como
areas,
la poca
but
bancarización
I
y
want
accesibilidad.
to see
Y la
how we can
pregunta es
solve
cómo podemos
challenges
desarrollar la
like
visión de negocios
banking
de
access
esta
and
zona. La segunda
insecurity
sería
and
muy abierta
develop
para
the
responder las preguntas concretas.
business
Luego,
vision of
Bárbara
the region.
Ardón
Then
pregunta, en San Diego
Barbara
hay algunas
asks,
empresas que puedes
in San
consultar
Diego,
para
there
ver
are
las
some
necesidades de
companies
alguna
that you
empresa
can
de la
look at
ciudad
to see
o
the
alguna cámara que te brinde información
needs
específica.
of
Jorge
the region.
Montón pide una
Then Jorge
recomendación porque
Monton
está haciendo una investigación
is
sobre
asking for a
emprendimiento en
recommendation
zonas
because
con
he is
discapacidad
researching
intelectual. Y por último, Germán
businesses by
Rodríguez
people
pregunta
who
qué
have
sería una
intellectual
simplificación
disabilities. And
de
then there is
burocratizar
an
los
ask
procesos de
question
colaboración
about
entre proyectos comunitarios y grandes
involving
empresas.
bureaucracy
Sé que
in
es mucho, cada
community
pregunta
projects.
podría
I
ser
know that
prácticamente
each
algo
of these
de
questions could be a
de
full
un
session,
contrato, seguramente sí, pero
and we
a
will
modo de
define
conclusión, a ver
how
si
we want to
podemos
answer them.
cerrar
But
con
as a
estas
conclusion,
cuatro
can we
respuestas
speak
o guía, ¿no?
to the
de la
questions
implementación.
that the people who are looking
Juan
at
Carlos,
us
¿te gustaría
asked in the
abordar
chat?
algunas o
Juan Carlos,
Sí,
would you
sí,
like
sí.
to
Me gustaría que las
answer
primeras, sobre todo,
some of them?
creo que ahí puedo aportar
first of all, the first one, I think I can speak to that. Those are the biggest challenges that we have. For example, the model that I talked about earlier in the session, where we have 4 businesses that are looking to connect with the value chain. Yes, the topic of banking is very complicated. In the case of the resin industry that is being developed here, which has been very successful because it's about 2 communities in a basin that are exporting resin to Guatemala, and that is that is their main income. So they can, for example, paying the licenses to the institutions here in Mexico, it's not easy. Exporting to Guatemala is not easy. So resin is useful for the chemical industry, but how did that story start? We have been creating a conference to build forestry knowledge and to build forestry business practices. And we invited a company in Michoacan, a very important company, an ejido, which is a model with a series of companies. And one of the young people who are there, who is a chemical engineer who manages a chemical plant, some colleagues of the rural communities asked, okay, what you said in your conference, I see in the forest, I will invite you. So not to so the substitute of the bank was the company, the resin company of Michoacan, because there was economic potential. So loans, for example, and loans not based on contracts, but in words. So what I'm telling is the story of a very specific community, is what they did. We did not intervene. So they made a deal, and then the first load of resin goes to Michoacan. So Michoacan provided training to Chiapas, and that was where the value was created. So as I mentioned, we had only 2 businesses. First was a private initiative. It developed a very interesting business project, and then it showed their model to the co-op that was also in the region, who wasn't doing things very well, but they thought how to better take care of the forest and how to gather the wood in a sustainable way. And they exchanged this knowledge, but not economically. So they were able to face the challenge by substituting economy with other types of trade. These are, of course, risky investments, which fortunately went very well. And this happened because it was impossible that Mexican banking is present and understanding the types of business models that occur. So, for example, the furniture company was a personal loan with a very high interest rate. So it's very risky, but the person sees that their business model is just a component of a larger picture. So what we are doing now is that apparently the financial sector international wants to identify business models that has social and environmental impact. So that could be helpful for the communities. For example, in shares, we are building that culture with those examples from the resin industry, from the wood industry, furniture industry. So the key here is in changing the culture. So the resin company, before doing that, they were exploiting the forest, and they became a resin company because they saw that they were destroying the forest, and they also saw that they could create an economy from a new activity. So understanding the area and making that decision where the government was not involved at all was fruitful. So this is the example that I can provide, that there are a lot of transactions that can be documented, and the role of research is necessary because we need to document how these financial decisions are being taken that now have become business models. And I don't think these are the most profitable businesses in the world. I know that this model is, of course, growing to scale. We have 4,000 hectares and we can grow. But if we had, for example, banking or investment, could have detonated a series of value chains and could generate a return. But I would say, yes, there is interest and there is an interest in Mexico to create a fund. There is money to be invested there, but what they need are projects that connect, for example, banking. The banking that an entrepreneur has access to is hardly going to connect with those funds that the country is going to destinate to projects. So we have not reached that, but the opportunity is there. And I think that there is a lot of potential there of how those agreements in profitability. I just want to close by saying that the debts are paid and they are exploring other markets. So there is talent and we just need to leverage it. Thank you, Juan Carlos. Miguel, please tell us. We ran out of time. We have the database of everyone who is online today. So we can make probably a second sessions to continue with this topic, but please tell us, Miguel. Yes, I think that this topic is going to be material for more sessions. We could create a podcast out of this, but this is very interesting. Thank you, Tayde. Thank you, Juan Carlos. You have opened your eyes in many topics, and we hope that through Jose Luis, you can share the presentation from Tayde, which is very interesting. Thank you so much. I think we will be in touch with everyone. We have your emails and we will let you know of the next actions that we do with our guests today. Thank you so much to Tayde, to Juan Carlos, and to the U.S. Embassy in Mexico, because thanks to them, we are able to take this content to all of us, and we are also going to record this content to share with more people so that we can transform lives and Mexico can reach the levels of entrepreneurship that we're looking for. Thank you so much for attending. Goodbye.
Muchas gracias, que tengan buena tarde.
Gracias, buena tarde.